Hey guys, Daniel here. This is another video. My next guest, he needs no introduction. If you're a comic book fan, I'm sure you've heard his name. He's been doing some amazing work recently. You may have been reading Not All Robots from AWA. That's, of course, Mark here. He's also gotten to work on stories such as Fantastic Four, Life Story, Billionaire Island, Second Coming, Snagglepuss, Wonder Twins, Red Sonja, Superman versus Imperious Lex, Deadbox, and his recently announced DC series, which is One Star Squadron. But Mark has very kindly agreed to come on for an interview and let me annoy him. But Mark, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm just glad to be alive.
I mean, that's how we're all doing, you know. If we're alive, then that's probably one good thing. Like I said, you're
Yeah,
immensely amazed by that beautiful introduction. You had to sit down. I find that it happens a lot in my interviews, and I'm
right.
messing around. But yeah, so thank you so much for coming on. You've just been doing so many amazing stuff for you, so I'm so excited to get into it. But so let's just start off with your recently announced series, One Star Squadron. So you know, how did that series come about? Did DC come to you? And for actually anyone who's watching that doesn't know, what can you tell us about One Star Squadron?
Yeah, they approached me. They wanted to do sort of a story about a JL, like sort of a Justice League title that involved business and involved them trying to make a living. And so what I proposed initially was JL Inc., but then they decided they didn't want it to be an actual Justice League book for obvious reasons. So I proposed using a bunch of B-list heroes and got them being like trying to navigate their way through the gig economy, like having to use basically an Uber for superheroes app called Heroes for You. And so they liked that idea, and that's what we sort of pivoted to. And One Star Squadron obviously is a reference to the fact that like these heroes are getting 1-star ratings on their apps.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, you know, getting to work in this series, because, like, for those who don't know, it's basically just a comic about a bunch of Z-listers who you could basically heroes for hire. You can pay them, they'll come and do your job. They're not exactly great superheroes, but they are trying, and that's what's important. But the lineup is fantastic. You know, you have characters like Plastic Man and Power Girl and Red Tornado, and then you have some more other obscure characters. So, did you get to choose the lineup?
Within reason, I got to choose the lineup, but they vetoed a lot of the heroes I wanted to put in because they're currently in use in other series, or they were, unbeknownst to me, currently dead. And I say currently dead because no one stays dead for long in the DC universe.
Yeah. I assume you're going to kill everyone in One Star Squadron. That's just going to be the end of issue one, and then everything else is just a resurrection arc.
Yeah,
That's the story.
right. They just all come back to life. It's like a revolving door. It's like,
Yeah, that's so common in all your work. You can just tell that you have such a despise for these characters, so you're just constantly killing them. Yeah, absolutely. So, was there any character that you did wanted to use, but that you didn't get to? So I imagine there
I
was a few.
wanted to use Our Man initially, but they said no because he was going to be getting his own series in the CW, and he was currently involved in some other series. So I had to sort of what I thought was creating my own character called Minuteman, which is kind of the same basic concept of Our Man, except even more pathetic because his powers only last for 1 minute. But then they informed me, oh, there was actually a Minuteman previously in DC lore, which I had no idea. So this is like a new iteration of Minuteman, apparently. But yeah, he basically takes Miraclo pills and they give him powers for 1 minute. So he's like, for 1 minute, he's as good as Superman, and then his powers just run out while he's in the middle of something.
Brilliant. You can't ask for more than that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
he
So
mostly does birthday parties.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I imagine that's most of their calls, just cats and trees and birthday parties. That's all they come out for. But
They
yeah,
do a lot of cameo videos. They, sometimes do bar mitzvahs.
wow. So if you want the Red Tornado to come to your bar mitzvah, not sure why, not sure what it has to do with anything, you can just bring him along. You know, he has met Batman at some point in current canon, so you know, pick him up. And I
Right.
assume that's just their slogan. We've met Batman at some point. You know,
Yeah,
higher
no,
ups.
there's one point where Minuteman, the kids are not impressed by Minuteman at the birthday party because they're like, who's this guy? Much the same way I was. So he starts showing them like selfies of him with Superman, and that's gonna like win them over.
That's perfect. You know, that's what we need in comic books. But yeah, so obviously these are all kind of Z-listers. So did you feel a bit more freedom there? Because, you know, and I found this a lot. Like if you write a character like Batman, people, yeah, like we just brought up Batman or Superman, people, they know how Batman and Superman, they know how they want them to sound. But if you know, have Red Tornado say a specific piece of dialogue, there's no one's going to get onto you on Twitter saying that's not how Red Tornado would deliver this line. So did you still feel a bit, actually no, in comic book fans, they still find a way to complain. But did you still find a bit of freedom getting to work in these kind of B-listers and C-listers?
Yeah, I mean, not that anyone really cares how I screw up characters because they just assume that if I'm writing it, it's going to be different than what they're used to, and you know, for better or for worse. Uh, but but yeah, the further you get away from the crown jewels, the more freedom you have to sort of play with the characters and to make them fallible, which is really what I wanted to write a series about characters who make mistakes and are just trying to get by, and making a lot of the hard day-to-day choices that we do. And so yeah, it was kind of liberating to use a bunch of characters that no one really is too worried about.
Yeah, and have you found like one weird character that you just weirdly loved writing for out of the group of weird characters? Is there one character in particular, or do you love them all equally like they're your weird one-star children?
No, I don't love them all equally. Yeah, I definitely have some favorites. And one character that sort of became like the one I look forward to writing each month was Heckler, whose
Yes.
powers are basically just heckling people. He just sort of like is a like a wise ass. So I liked writing him. Um, but yeah, you say you try to love them all equally, but the truth is that you definitely have favorites. You definitely have, and I think in my experience, the favorites are the characters who get to say things you wish you could get away with saying.
Absolutely. And every comic book team needs a heckler or wise ass, keep everyone in check. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, absolutely. And so would you kind of consider this a team book? Because we're working on all these separate characters, or is it just more of a group comic? Or
Yeah, it's not really a team, it's more of a group, but it's an ensemble cast. And but although Red Tornado is kind of the main character because he's the manager of the business, it's definitely an ensemble cast, and it kind of tells their collective story about working at this business, and it's sort of ending horribly.
definitely. And did you know from the very start you wanted it to be a limited series with 6 issues, or were you originally planning to go ongoing? Or
No, I've always wanted to be a limited series because I like working in limited series better because it's easier to tell a finite story than to tell something that just keeps going on and on and on. I want when I write a story, I like to have an end point in mind. Like I like knowing how it's going to end when I start, and it's a lot easier to do when you're writing a limited series.
yeah, definitely. And so, like I said, before you even worked on a series, or did you have an ending in mind when you were first thinking about it, or did you kind of come to the point, like with most of your stories, do you kind of had to have an ending for some of the series you're currently working on in mind?
Yeah, usually, almost always, I have an end point in mind when I start working on it, and for this one in particular, I did.
Yeah, definitely. And so, have you found, because this book obviously feels very unique, but that's like with most of your work. Like this, is why I was so excited to interview you, because you look at it and like every book is so separate, and it's so brilliant. You can see that they all kind of have this uniqueness to them. And so, do you consider One Star Squadron kind of unique in terms of the new DC books that are coming out? Because it seems to be very much like a interesting new take on these fun characters. So, would you consider it a new, a unique take?
Yeah, I think it probably is, because it's not really about trying to tell a traditional DC superhero story. It's more about telling a workplace story involving DC superheroes, and a lot of it's based upon my own personal experiences because I worked in the or I worked in the public sector as like the manager of a building at a public university for years and years. So a lot of it draws upon my own sort of personal experiences and sort of like with like workplace politics and stuff. And I wanted to imbue it with that, make it less of like a superhero story with bits of real life, and make it more about real life with bits of superhero in it instead.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I assume that in your real life job, you said, "No, guys, I met Superman," and you just hold up this picture. And is that how you get everyone to like you? Is that
Yeah, I have to do a lot of shameless sort of like name dropping in real
Yeah,
life.
as a comic book writer, I assume Superman just comes to your front door every morning and just says, "No, this is not exactly how I would sound at this exact comic." And yeah, so, and have you found that there's kind of been an unexpected fun, because you look at it and you can kind of feel like you already know that you're going to have fun with it, and it already looks like a super fun book. So have you found it yourself as a writer, you're even having fun currently writing the book?
Yeah, and a lot of that, credit for that goes to Steve Lieber, the artist on it,
Oh yeah.
because it's almost like we dare each other to take it a step farther. Like I'll send him a script, and he'll make the art even like weirder and like a little funnier than the script was, and then I'll have to like, oh, now I got to rewrite the dialogue to make it match his art. And so it's really great to work with someone like that who sort of instantly gets the sensibility and is like perhaps even better at it than I am. So yeah, I think we're both having a lot of fun on this book.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Plastic Man is another character who does he feature in the book much, or does he have more of a minor role?
He's a minor role, but yeah, he shows up several times. He has an impact on the story.
Yeah,
But he's
but
kind
like
of like the one that they all look up to. He's like the one who's like gets all the sweet gigs because he's more recognizable and actually has some legitimate superpowers as opposed to somebody like Heckler who's just makes fun of people.
yeah, if you look up to Plastic Man, you need to get yourself in check. There's not much other words. I mean, if you're looking up to Plastic Man of all people, but yeah. So, like I said, now another question I want to ask you is now. This is a character who would not fit in at all, but I bring up this character in all my interviews because I love him and I will die on this hill. Any Condiment King, just for no reason, it's just Condiment King in the story.
Is who?
Condiment King. Do you not know who Condiment King is?
I don't know. I've never
Okay,
heard of
okay.
Condiment King before now.
I'm
But
about
he
to
sounds
tell
great.
you.
He sounds like the perfect sort of character that
Oh
would
my God.
make it in the story.
I'm about
Unfortunately, he does not.
I'm about
So I
to.
guess
All
maybe
right,
about it.
that's fine. I'm just so grateful I had the chance to tell someone who Condiment King is. Okay, he's the
Yeah.
best character in the whole entire DC universe. You think you know DC? This guy changes it. So he's a villain who just shoots ketchup and mustard. That's his whole gimmick. Just guns. His real name is Mitchell Mayonnaise. It's incredibly stupid. I love it so much. He basically
Yeah.
has this ketchup gun. He's a Batman villain. He appeared in one episode of Batman the animated series, and he just goes around shooting people with like mustard and ketchup. He's pretty useless. But yeah,
He'd
there
be
you go.
perfect for like a company picnic though. Like
Yeah,
sign him up
wouldn't
for
he
a
just? Yeah,
picnic.
but he'd probably try and poison the ketchup supply because when you
Yeah,
think of
maybe not the
Condiment King,
best.
he's like this cunning genius. So can you
On
really?
second thought, he's kind of an HR nightmare.
Yeah, he always has that pickle up his sleeve, just waiting to pull it out, for the right exact moment. So yeah, that's a new character you can use in some of your future DC works. I'm very generous, introducing you to Condiment King. I bring him up in all my interview with current DC writers, so I figure at some point the editors will just get one backlash of Condiment King, and then that'll be my Machiavellian, master plan, sort of
Yeah,
Ozymandias style, which is probably
you
on par.
you should get if anyone ever does a Condiment King series, you should get like some sort of special thanks
Yeah, definitely. I need those royalty
or
checks.
they should draw you into the comic. You could be a
Absolutely.
character.
So meta as well, it has to end like that. Of course, DC, their email must be busted because I was sending them my Condiment King script over and over and over. 800 pages of pure gold. Obviously, like I said, broken. I think
Yeah,
it's the next Watchmen. I'll just have to wait till it gets to them. But yeah,
you've
absolutely.
probably been blocked.
Yeah, it could be that, I think the best thing to be would either pin them down in person and then throw the script at them or just continue to bother them. It can either way works fine for me.
Yeah, the way to do it is to corner an editor at a convention and present them with your 800-page Condiment King script.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Conman King is a metaphor for greed when you really think about him as a character, and it's a Shakespearean writer. It's just Shakespearean level writing. It's perfect. But yeah, so I just have to bring up Conman King because why not? And so another one
Well,
of your
it's a great
series.
metaphor because these characters, the B-list characters, they're not like the main dish. They're not the hot dog. They're just sort of the relish that flavors the hot dog or that backs it up. So Condiment King's kind of the perfect embodiment of that idea of like a supplementary hero or villain.
This is why I had to have you on. You're just a comic book genius. You see, like I said, I whipped out Conman King and you managed to pull something beautiful out of that. Now, you see, that's why we need you on. Yeah, so another one of your series is that you're doing a brilliant job on that I've been absolutely loving. And I've seen it's been blowing up on Twitter. It's Fantastic Four Life Story. I believe, did issue 4 or is it issue 3 that just came out recently?
Yeah, issue 4 it just came out. The set in the 1990s. But yeah, that
Oh,
just came out.
1990s. Yeah, perfect. But this is such an interesting concept. And for those that don't know, or anyone who's not aware, basically the concept of this is what if you followed the Fantastic Four throughout their whole life? And this is something that's recently done with Spider-Man. But it's like, so when they were actually written in the 60s or in Stan Lee, and it shows them aging chronologically without reboots or anything. And so, yeah, how did this come about? Did you pitch this to Marvel? Did Marvel come to you and ask you to work on this? Or
Marvel came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in writing it, and of course I said yes because I love the Fantastic Four and it was like a dream project. I would have pitched it if I had any idea that one they were going to series and B that they would be interested in having me write it. But really, Will Moss approached Tom Brevoort and suggested me as a writer who they
oh,
should
brilliant.
think about like writing it. And I'm so glad he did because it's been just a joy to write. It's been a dream to write Fantastic Four title.
Definitely. And you've been doing such a brilliant job because I think like the Fantastic Four for me as a team, I always found them interesting because what kid doesn't see a big rock man, big fireman, some woman that goes invisible, and then some stretchy dude and doesn't say that's just awesome. But I like they've always just been a team that I've liked, but after this, they're definitely now one of my favorite teams because I've never really read the Fantastic Four in an ongoing. So I mean, this really isn't really an ongoing, but I've definitely been loving what you're doing. I think you do a brilliant job nailing the characters. But so like the Fantastic Four, did you do any like preparation or because I imagine you have to do quite a lot of research because you obviously pay a lot of homage to like the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby stories, but you also do come up with really new concepts, and it's a really fun blend of all that. So did you have to do any prior research and maybe look up some old Fantastic Four stories?
Yeah, I definitely did. And one of the ones that sort of snuck in and really kind of made itself like a staple of what I was basing this series off of is the Fantastic Four annual from like I think 1998 or 96. I don't know why, but it was like really stuck with me and made it into this series. But yeah, I also was really just sort of like mostly wanted to be an homage. Well, I don't really like tasteful homages, but I did want to encourage it to, in a way, do what they could not. By which I mean, they were writing comic books in the 1960s, not realizing, oh, we're writing comic books about the 1960s because it wasn't the 1960s. Then it was just what was going on right now. It was so I wanted to write comic book set back then in that sort of Lee Kirby universe. But in retrospect, writing about the 1960s, knowing that, understanding that era as history, and looking back, picking out the things that are sort of important. And I tried to do that with each decade because the writers who were writing in the 60s, 70s, 80s weren't writing about the Fantastic Four in history. They're writing about the Fantastic Four in the present. And so I wanted to like give it a little more perspective by just writing about them set in what we now recognize as the important events of history.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you just and I know you used also a lot of historic figures, like I believe JFK even appears in some issues. So is there any pushback from Marvel on that because these are real people, or are they all kind of public domain and you were just free to use them?
Well, the elected officials, presidents, heads of state, are kind of public domain, so you can use them. It gets a little dicier when you're using pop culture people. Like, for example, in the 60s issue, there is like this quartet of musicians who some might say look a lot like the Beatles, but I couldn't call them the Beatles or even the Fab Four. I had to sort of dance around that a little bit, but it clearly is supposed to be a reference to a band much like the Beatles.
Yeah, brilliant, absolutely there. And so what I also love in the team is how you've been putting like a focus on each character, and you can like see each character definitely has their moment, each issue. Is that important for you? Because you can't write an issue and then realize, oh, I never touched on the Thing or I never touched on Sue. So it's important for you to give each of these characters their moment in the sun.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the sort of conceits I entered the series with, is that I wanted each of them to narrate an issue, like each one to have an entire issue told from their perspective. And because I didn't want it to be the sort of thing where like Johnny's just always in the background giving people a thumbs up, where Sue sort of like turns invisible and you don't see her for the rest of the series. I definitely wanted to be like about them as a functioning as a family and also as individuals.
Yeah, definitely. And so, was there any one character in particular that? Because I mean, the Fantastic Four, I think we all have our favorite members. Or, but for you, was there one character for you that was the most compelling to write? Because I think most writers end up saying Ben Grimm because they just find him a really interesting character. So, was there one character in particular who you found really interesting to write for, or that you didn't really expect would be so complex or fun?
Well, Ben is, yeah, obviously a great character to write because he has like sort of the most interesting voice and he's sort of cantankerous. So you can find, but I think the one that really sort of resonated with me, like the one I felt like this speaks the most to my experience, was actually Franklin, their son. Like he
Wow.
narrates an issue, and it was kind of the one where I felt like most like this is I'm not having to like change my voice at all. I'm just writing as me. It's sort of my experience as being a son, and and growing up. And so that was yeah, kind of unexpected. I also really enjoyed writing Reed, obviously, but yeah, Franklin was the one I was kind of surprised that really sort of spoke to me.
Yeah, definitely. And so, I also love what you've been doing, with Johnny Storm because he was always absolutely my favorite member because I just thought he was hilarious. But yeah, so Johnny Storm, and you also see that, Sue Storm obviously feels bad because those who don't know the origins of the Fantastic Four. They go up into the rocket, something goes wrong, they all gain these new powers. That's essentially just to short it up a lot. And so Sue Storm, she's talking to Johnny. She says, I never apologized, because I let you come on that mission, and now you have these powers. And he was like, you don't have to apologize. I didn't do it because I wanted, because I didn't like, Reed Richards. I did it because I liked you. And so, is it important for you for these characters to also have personal moments, as long with there being a lot of action? So, it's important for you to give these characters their personal moments.
Yeah, I think what the Fantastic Four represents to me more than anything, and probably to most people, is it's a story about relationships. It's the powers are kind of in the background, and the
Yeah,
powers come to play when they're saving the world. But really, the story is about their relationships and their relationships, both as a family together and also one on one with each other. So I tried to give each of them like a unique dynamic
yeah.
with relationships to each other member of the team.
Yeah, definitely. And so getting to work on like all these different characters, have you, and like I know like you can see this is chock full of Easter eggs. Like there are some characters in this book who have appeared in like one issue of Fantastic Four in the 60s and stuff like that. So it's important for you to also pay homage to some of the Stan Lee stories while also coming up with new concepts. And is it kind of difficult for you to blend those together, or have you found it easy?
No, it really has been pretty organic, and I think that the key is that I just am telling the story I want to tell, and then I find the characters or the moments that best fit that what I'm trying to do. And luckily, the Fantastic Four has been around for so long, and there's been so many characters coming in and out that door that it's a huge toy chest to choose from in terms of plugging characters in or drawing moments of inspiration from other issues.
Yeah, definitely. And so I also love how you've been treating Galactus because he's always like, but now after reading this book, I think he's terrifying. He's always been so cool to me. Big giant goes around just eating planets, and why not? That's brilliant. But it wasn't until after I'm reading this that like he kind of gives me like chills. He's such a cool character. So, and have you kind of been treating Galactus as like an unstoppable object? Because we can see
Right.
slowly throughout the issues that he's slowly coming for them and he's threatening them. And then we see that brilliant spread of the Thing and Reed Richards in space next to Galactus. And like that's just, brilliant. And so, have you been treating Galactus as like a kind of an unstoppable force or an immovable object?
Yeah, I want him to be less of like a character who shows up every week and you fight with them, as more like a force of nature. Like
Yeah,
here is the end that is coming, and in like an astronomical time. Like he's not going to show up tomorrow. He's not going to show up next week. He's coming, and it might take decades. It might take centuries, but he will come. And when he does, everything's doomed. And so I wanted him to be more that sort of Lovecraftian sort of immovable force of nature rather than just some guy who shows up and you fight with and then fight with again the next week.
yeah, brilliant. We all know the one man who could actually defeat him is easily hands down Condiment King because he just slip on the ketchup and just break his neck, and then that's the end of that. Which I can't believe I just gave away the ending to my 800-page script, but we'll have to move on, of course, solemnly. But yeah, so you also got to include some other villains. Did you take a look at the villains list? Because you did include characters like Doctor Doom, and I believe Mole Man is in it for like a bit of one issue or something.
Yeah,
And
Mole
so,
Man makes a brief appearance in the 60s issue. One character who becomes sort of a major character who I wasn't really planning on going in, but he just seemed to work out was the Mad Thinker.
yeah,
And he is like a character that comes prominently into play in the story as it unfolds later on too. So that was one. But obviously, if you're doing a Fantastic Four story, especially a life story that sort of tells their story, you have to give certain characters their due. Doctor Doom's got to be important.
yeah.
Galactus has got to show up. Silver Surfer's got to be in there somewhere. So you try to like balance the classics and these great villains because they got like one of the greatest crews of villains of any superheroes in the world, and so you got to use that. But I also wanted to just tell the story I was wanted to tell and use villains that were maybe a little off the beaten track to sort of fill in these roles that I needed to tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And so another thing I love about Fantastic Four is that they're just such a brilliant group of characters. So, here's just a hypothetical question thrown out there. Who wins in a fight, One Star Squadron or Fantastic Four? I think we all kind of know the answer, but, who do you think wins that battle?
Well, I think that Fantastic Four wins the fight, and One Star Squadron wins the lawsuit after the fight.
Yeah, they win that. They get those sweet, sweet. Even though they have broken arms, they'll still be like, haha, stuck on that
Jury
fantastic.
jury will just feel sorry for the One Star Squadron.
Yeah,
They're
they'll
like
probably
perfect lawyer bait.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that's their story. They're just going around getting beaten up by the Justice League and suing. Brilliant concept there. But yeah, so it leads me on to my next question. If you could see the Fantastic Four go up against any other team in comic book history, who would it be? Who's that one team that they probably haven't gone up against yet?
I don't know. They're very science focused. So I think maybe like someone who's more mysterious, like maybe um, Doctor Strange. Maybe I see
Brilliant.
like sort of like a clash of worldviews between the two.
Definitely, you could definitely see that, and of course, Condiment King. But we all know that's not even much of a fight.
That
It's more
goes without saying.
Yeah, it's more just Condiment King stepping on them, and then that's the end of your series, you know? But yeah, absolutely. So the Fantastic Four, like I said, which issue is out right now, which people can pick up from their local comic book store?
We're four is available right now. Five comes out sometime later this month.
And is this an ongoing? I believe it's limited. It stops at some point. Is it?
It
Issue
stops at
12?
6.
Stop at
Yeah.
6. Exactly. So what perfect jumping on point. I'd highly recommend you pick it up. But you've also been including a lot of other Marvel characters, like I believe Iron Man and Hank Pym makes an appearance. So did you know from the very start you wanted to include some familiar faces?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was one of the things that Chip did very deftly with the Spider-Man life story was he wove it into like the story of other superheroes, and he had other sorts of parts of the Marvel universe show up in his story. And I love the way he did it. So I definitely wanted to like have other heroes come and play a part in the Fantastic Four story as well.
Yeah, definitely. So everyone make sure to go pick up like the most recent issue from your local comic book store. Highly recommend you do so. But another series you've been crushing it. I've seen so much like love about it on like all this Twitter and Facebook. But it's Not All Robots from AWA, which has been such a fantastic series. But so how did that come about? Did you pitch that to AWA, or did AWA pitch that to you, or?
I pitched Not All Robots to pretty much everybody, and everybody turned it down. Nobody wanted to touch it for whatever reason. But yeah, AWA was the one place that said, "Oh yeah, we love it. We'll do this." So
Brilliant.
it ended up there, and yeah, and they really just let me make it my own way, and I'm glad they did because it's been one of my most rewarding writing experiences, being able to just sort of like unload in Not All Robots.
Yeah, definitely. And so is there a bit more freedom working on a book like Not All Robots as opposed to, Fantastic Four or, even One Star Squadron? Because people know how Ben Grimm sounds and stuff like we were just touching on earlier. It may be the same for One Star Squadron.
Yeah.
But I'd imagine there's much more freedom working on something like Not All Robots because if you wanted to, you could just kill a character off and then that's that.
Yeah, there's always much more freedom writing your own creator-owned characters than there is writing for the big twos. But and not just because you can do whatever you want to the characters, but also just tonality. You
Yeah.
can be a little edgier. You can say things you couldn't get away with saying in a rated teen comic book, and you could deal with themes that are kind of heavy and dark in a way you have to sort of pull your punches a little if it's in you're dealing with somebody else's IP. If you're driving someone else's car, you got better bring it back in one piece.
Yeah, definitely. And so for anyone watching who's not, familiar with the concept of Not All Robots, what can you tell everyone about it?
It's about a near future where robots have all the jobs and humans basically just sort of are almost kept as pets. I mean, the humans, the way they keep people from like starving to death, despite the fact that humans can't really cut it in the workforce anymore, is they assign one robot to each human family. So the humans all kind of resent the robot who's suddenly living in their house because they're afraid the robot might go crazy and kill them. And the robots all kind of resent the humans that are suddenly being forced to like serve in a way, being forced to
Yeah.
support with their work.
Yeah, brilliant. And this book is probably very much anti this. But if you had the choice, would you have a pet robot? Would you just for the crack like just have a pet robot?
I would have a pet robot if it wasn't recording me. I don't know. I just find that one creepy. I don't have like an Alexa. I don't have like any of these devices because it just weirds me out to think that like you're constantly being surreptitiously observed, which you probably are anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
having like a cell phone in my pocket means that my metadata is being collected constantly. But the idea that I like to at least preserve the illusion that I'm not living in a surveillance state.
I mean, you're famous comic book writer Mark Russell. We have to keep tabs on you, you know? It's just a matter of fact. Like I
Yeah,
assume
I don't know what anyone's going to do with this information. They'll probably be really disappointed if they are spying on me. But yeah, it's just the idea that we are becoming more and more um, of a data aggregation and less like individual sort of
Yeah.
existential actors.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, I think if, my answer is not as deep, I'd absolutely just have a pet robot just because I want to ride it around the house for no reason. As long as, I mean, it's a robot. So in what world am I going to say no?
Yeah.
He'll probably go Blade Runner and try and kill me, but that's okay. I always knew I'd die at the hands of a robot. It was only a matter of
Just don't
time.
give it your credit card information. It'll just start ordering like robot lube and cleaning fluid and
Wait, you're not supposed to?
accessories.
Oh, I
Yeah.
messed up big
No.
time. That robot literally owns that. I have €5 to my name now. That just belongs to that
It
robot.
probably has like a social security number now, and it's like racking up debt for you in
Yeah.
Singapore.
In fair, that's a fair trade. Robot for credit card information. Yeah, I can live with that. That doesn't put me too bad down the drain. Of course I'll grow to regret that, but still at the time it was a good decision because robot. Yeah, absolutely. And so is it quite difficult to write robots? Because the main character is of course named Razor Ball, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so is there a difference in writing, humans to robots? Because robots, I think we've all kind of built up. We all kind of know what robots sound like in our head, like affirmative, and they all sound in this
Yeah.
very specific way. So is it tough for you to write robots as opposed to writing human dialogue? Because I did notice you're very good with the dialogue in all your books. So was it important for you to write robot dialogue and human dialogue and maybe have a difference between them?
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think the big difference is that I tried to write the robots like they're work bros. Like the robots all talk to each other like they're just a couple guys hanging out at work, complaining about the boss and complaining about their families and stuff. Whereas the humans are, I think, more genuinely terrified. The humans kind of come in two flavors. They're either sort of genuinely terrified of the robots, or they've completely drunk the Kool-Aid and think the robots are the greatest thing ever. And those are kind of the two speeds of the humans. But yeah, I definitely wanted the robots to sort of be sort of like just sort of put upon guys work, and the humans to be in a sort of state of terror, or a state of like sort of really questioning what this is going to mean for their continued existence.
Absolutely, and it's just brilliant stuff like that. But yeah, so which issue of Not All Robots is the most recent one? Is it issue 3? Is it?
2 is out right now. 3 comes out in I think a couple weeks.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone can go pick up 2. I'll link them all in the description and mention them all so you can go pick them up. Yeah, so Not All Robots. And so another thing I want to touch on, Deadbox, which was a recent story you've done absolutely brilliant. And I know you posted about it a bit on Facebook. But yeah, so what was it like getting to work on Deadbox, Because that's a Vault comic. So did you pitch that to Vault as well? Because like I said, every comic book publishing company, just obviously it sounds like they don't want any part of any
Yeah.
of your comics. So did you pitch Deadbox to them or?
Yeah, I pitched Deadbox to them, and it really was kind of like a combination of like 2 ideas I wanted to do. It was a combination, one like about um, growing up in sort of a small semi-rural area, and feeling out of place there, which is kind of where I came from.
Yeah.
And also I want to do one about like movies that would never be made, movies that Hollywood would never make in their right mind. um, and so I got to sort of combine them together with this, because the cursed Deadbox machine, DVD rental machine, has these movies that don't really exist in the Hollywood canon and are kind of haunted and tell people more about themselves than they care to know. But it's kind of split back and forth between that and the story of the people in the town of Lost Turkey.
Yeah, definitely sounds brilliant. And so, would you consider this a very personal story? And is it more personal working on your own characters as opposed to working on Fantastic Four or One Star Squadrons? Because these are kind of your characters, so you kind of care for them more, I suppose. Or do you find it's more like each story is just as personal, or do you find working your own stuff is more personal?
Well, I try to take everything I work on very personally and to imbue myself in it and to talk about things that really matter to me. Because me, it's like, if you're not doing that, you're just kind of working as a mercenary. You're just sort of stepping in and it's like,
Yeah.
well, I'll just shit out a story. And,
Yeah.
but I try to make each story, whether I'm writing someone else's characters or writing my own, about me and my thoughts about the universe and where we're headed, and what we should be doing differently, regardless of what I'm writing. But the thing that is nice about writing my own sort of story like this is that I can make it more overtly about my own experience, or I can make it more about I can tailor the characters to the situations I want to talk about, and that's really a unique and rewarding experience for a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is kind of a horror story. Is it difficult for you to write horror? Because I know a lot of writers struggle with that because most of the great stuff has kind of been done. So is it tough for you to kind of come up with new concepts that are still kind of scary? And so is writing horror tough for you?
I think for me the key was to not set out to write a horror story, but just to write a story and let it sort of organically just figure out what the genre is or what it is as you're writing it. And at some point, it just occurred to me that this is a horror story because this is about like a curse really, and the curse that we not only the curse of like this haunted rental machine, but also the curse we place upon ourselves by forcing ourselves to live lives that don't mean anything to us. And I think
Yeah.
that's where the horror really comes from.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's difficult for you to make people care about your characters because I know Scott Snyder perfectly in a panel he did where he said, the thing about working on Batman is that it's your job to make people continue to care about Batman. But when you're doing your own characters, it's your job to make people care about your characters. And so did you find that was kind of the same for this? Because, it's a different thing to work on. Like I said, bring it back here, Fantastic Four, because everyone knows the Fantastic Four. So do you find that was important for you to get people to, like your new characters?
Yeah, they don't really have to like them so much as they have to, I think, understand them. And
Yeah.
I think that that's what people really want is they want to feel like connected. They want to feel like they are understood by someone else on the planet and that they understand in turn someone else on the planet. I think that's what a lot of why people cling to fictional characters in pop culture because they feel these characters make them feel understood and and convince them that they have the capacity to really connect and understand another human being, even if that human being isn't real. So yeah, it's always my goal. And I think the way you do that is that you base the characters on real people or at least real things that you are feeling and going through. Because I think if you are feeling something and you are undergoing something, chances are there's a million people out there who are feeling or going through the same thing.
Yeah,
We're not that.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. And so Deadbox, people can pick that up from their local comic book store.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
issue 1 is out right now. Issue 2 comes out, I think, like in a week or two.
Yeah, brilliant. So as the time recording when this video is up, you can probably go pick it up, and I'd highly recommend you do so. But so another one of your works, it's probably one of your more. It's well, definitely the work I was introduced. It's a comic that I was introduced to your work with. It's Wonder Twins, and so you got to do quite a bit of work. And I was like getting to work on Wonder Twins. Was that some of your earliest DC work?
Yeah, no, that was it was probably my first, yeah, it was definitely my first DC series that actually was about superheroes. Because I'd done a couple series with DC before, but they were Hanna-Barbera
Yeah.
titles like the Flintstones and Snagglepuss. But the Wonder Twins were the first one that was like a series that I was allowed to write using DC characters, and it was part of Brian Michael Bendis's Wonder Comics line, about like teenage superheroes and superhero comics for teens. And yeah, it was really my attempt to make like a YA book. And I think what I wanted to do was like these are the things I would tell myself as a teenager if I could
Yeah.
go back in time and tell myself, have some perspective. Don't worry about it. You're going to be don't worry about being embarrassed in school because everyone's going to be humiliated at some point. So a lot of it just sort of like is my own sort of wisdom that I would impart to myself if I had been smarter when I was young.
Yeah, definitely. And so, like I said, getting to work on this character, I myself as a twin. It's why this is probably my favorite series you got to do. But yeah, so working on it, I know you mentioned in an interview before that you didn't really consider them as twins. You consider them as two incomplete people because, of course, they kind of. So, do you still consider that for these two characters?
Yeah, I do. But yeah, the way I approach the characters is that there's sort of one really well-adjusted person that tragically cut in half. So like Zan is really confident and outgoing, but he's also kind of like clueless and
Yeah.
doesn't really, understand the implications of everything he's doing. Whereas Jane is kind of the opposite. She's very thoughtful and very thinks everything through to the nth degree. But at the same time, it makes her very sort of reticent and not very socially confident.
Yeah.
And I think that beyond like obviously the schism of their different superpowers, they need each other for that reason too, because they both have like a part of the other that the other lacks. And I think that's what makes them really effective, not only as a superhero team, but also as brother and sister.
Yeah, definitely. And so another character I love that you got to include, just one word, Gleek. He's probably one of the more silliest characters. He's basically just this blue alien monkey. I don't know why. Like I said, I love Condiment King and Gleek, no in between. I just love the monkey characters like Detective Chimp. I don't know. It's just some weird love. But yeah, so Gleek, he's a pretty obscure character. So Did you choose to put them into the book, or did editorial come to you and ask you
Yeah.
to? Or
No, I grew up with the Wonder Twins. I used to watch the Super Friends every Saturday morning when I was a kid. And Gleek was like one of my favorites. I loved it when Gleek showed up because he'd always do something stupid, like, he'd put a banana in the supercomputer or something. So, yeah, I definitely wanted to put Gleek in the Wonder Twins,
definitely.
but I want him to be a little different. I don't want him to just be like sort of the comic relief that he was in the cartoon series. I want him to actually have a reason for being there. So I tried to like give him his own sort of like backstory that was different than the Wonder Twins.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And so one of your more recent series, and I know I made a review of this on my channel, you guys can go pick it up if you'd like to, was Superman versus Imperious Lex Future State, which was such a fantastic series. I really loved it. Yeah, so, how did that come about? How were you approached about Future State at all? Did DC ask you to come work on that, or?
Yeah, DC approached me. They were doing the Future State titles, and they asked me to write a story specifically revolving around Lex Luthor on the planet Lexor. And so they gave me 3 issues. So I decided I was going to make like this series about sort of like a metaphor for um, for nationalism and how nationalism goes awry uh, with Lexor being sort of the country that is destroying itself with sort of with hyper nationalism in a time where I feel like a lot of the world is doing the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think you did a brilliant job, especially writing Superman, because with each page, and like even though it was just one issue, like and no, well, of course, in the first issue, second issue, like you could really feel like that was what Superman should be, and like I loved how you wrote him as a character of optimism and hope, and I thought that was what Superman should be, and I loved how you did that. So was it important for you while working on it to like constantly make Superman this version who just wants to help people, and was it important for you to kind of nail that optimism?
And why we really need Superman, what makes him important now, is that he is like sort of a moral compass. He is a guy who understands who he is, and it
Yeah.
isn't authentic to what he is. And what he is he's like somebody who sees not the moment, not the next hour. He's someone who like is going to be alive for thousands of years, and so he tries to like build the best version of humanity possible. How is his actions are going to have an impact on humanity for century eons going forward. It makes him a very wise, sort of forward thinking people. So even though we might react like on based upon instincts like revenge or short term gain, it's like Superman that makes no sense. That he wants to see things in the line of planetary existence. And it's one of the things that like I think writing him is really sort of therapeutic because it gives me a sense of my own perspective of like
Yeah.
how futile it is to sort of react out of anger or hate towards other people, about how we need to think about what is going to help the species survive as a whole over the long term.
Yeah, definitely. And so I loved your take on Superman. I thought it was so brilliant. And I'd love to see you do more work on Superman. And so then when working on Lex Luthor, did you just try and make him the complete opposite of all of everything you just said there?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, he's more just about like whatever suits him, and he just sort of is so arrogant that he figures that whatever problems this creates, he'll just be smart enough to get out of that mess, the corner, but then using his genius to get out of that corner.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And I loved your work on that. Everyone, I'd highly recommend you go pick it up. You can check out my review on it if you'd like. But the last couple of comics I want to touch on is also you worked on Hanna-Barbera's series from DC Comics, which is I know loads of people adore your work on that, which was like Snagglepuss and oh, the Flintstones as well. It slipped my mind a second. But it was like getting to work on those two series because like I said, that was like your first work for DC, right?
Well, my very first work for DC was a comic book called Prez, which is about the first teenage president of the United States,
Yeah.
but didn't last very long. It got canceled. So after that, they gave me the Flintstones, and that was sort of the one that I think took off with people. That one that people still sort of associate me with is the Flintstones. And at the time, because it failed so badly, I thought when they offered me to write the Flintstones, this is probably the last chance I'm ever going to get to write a comic book. They're probably going to politely ask me to leave and never come back after this one. So I figured if this is it, this is the last time I'm going to chance to work in this medium. I should make it about something really important. I should put the things I really want to say to the world in this comic book. And so I
Yeah.
made it sort of my grand critique about civilization, using the world's first civilization, Bedrock, as my template. And luckily, though, it wasn't a failure. Did not see the end of my career in comics, and I'm still very very proud of it.
Yeah, definitely. So as long as obviously somehow you manage to cheat your way to continue into comics, and I think the world is a better place for it because we're still getting some amazing, so we're still getting amazing stories. But yeah, so one more comic I want to touch on before we wrap up is Billionaire Island, which I thought was a fantastic comic. What was it like getting to work on that?
Yeah, no, it was great. That was an idea that I'd had for a while. It actually started when I was reading an article about the average age of billionaires was like 64. And I read this article probably about like 5 years ago. The average age of billionaires is like 64. So I thought to myself, just privately, well, that means that in about 20 years, the entire world is going to be run by dementia. It's like people are going to be in their 80s, they're going to have all this enormous wealth, and it's just going to be, run by people who are, eating banana pudding and having
Perfect.
to use a bedpan. And so I wanted to write about that, sort of like this end game of the human race where we've allowed all of the wealth to be accrued by a small group of people who are not only acting selfishly, but maybe aren't even acting rationally. And I also had read these articles about how billionaires were buying private bunkers in New Zealand, or were creating their own sort of like yachts, super yachts, that they could, when the end of the world that they caused happens, they can just sail away and live on their $1 billion yacht. And so I really wanted to be about that, about how we are, this is basically what we are devoting the world's wealth to right now. It's not saving the world from the problems we are creating in obtaining the world's wealth, but we're just allowing it to all sort of be piled into this getaway car for billionaires.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's such a brilliant concept there. But yeah, like, and of course, you just have such a like brilliant list of comic books that you've worked on. So, my last three questions: have you noticed improvement as a writer? Like, you look back some of your earlier work and say, "Oh, I could have done that," or "Oh, I should have done this," and you still find that you're constantly improving as a writer.
I find I'm improving and also getting worse at the same time. Like, I'm improving in the sense that, like, yeah, this is like craft wise, I'm better than I've ever been. But at the same time, it's like I look back at some of the stuff I wrote early on. I'm like, wow, I'll probably never be that original or daring again. And so part of what I try to do as a writer is to not entirely sacrifice one for the other, to like allow myself to continue to do things that are not within my comfort zone and maybe a little stupid, but that still sort of keep me thinking creatively and trying
Yeah.
to like push the envelope a little bit. And that's kind of what I strive for as a writer, is being somebody who not necessarily is like improving the writing craft constantly, but somebody who is like learning from experience while not learning so much that you stifle your own creativity. Because I think that's really where the magic comes from, is your willingness to to make dumb mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. You just put it perfectly there. And so another question I want to ask you, if you could, what's your dream comic book character? Who's that one character, besides Condiment King, of course, that you just love to work on? Who's that one character that you haven't gotten a chance to yet that you'd love to work on?
Oh well, I think if I could choose anything, I would probably do a flaming carrot series.
That's perfect. I did
Bob
not expect that
Bob Burden
answer.
might have something to say about that, but yeah, he's like one of my all-time favorite characters.
What is it about, the character that just appeals to you? What is it about that one character?
He lives in this completely like wacky universe where the rules are just sort of made up as you go along, and it's just one of the most creative, like out there comic books I've ever read.
Brilliant. Let's get Mark on Flaming Carrot. Everyone, get that trending on Twitter. Yeah. So my last and final question: if anyone watching was looking to get into comic books, what advice would you have for them?
I would say, just it depends on how you want to get in. If you want to be a writer or an artist, but I would say whatever you're working on, just write, hone your craft now. Don't
Yeah.
wait for permission, and just sort of like write something. And eventually, I think everything you create as an artist or as a writer is a lottery ticket you send out into the universe, and you never know who's going to scratch it off. I got into comics because Marie Javins, who was for a long time my editor at DC and is now the editor in chief, she discovered some of my Count Chocula fan fiction on Facebook. And she thought, oh, that guy should write a comic book. So you never know. As long as you're putting stuff out there and writing and creating something, you never know who's going to see it and what it's going to become.
Absolutely, you just put it perfectly there, Mark. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Before we finish up, are you on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anywhere people can check you out on social media?
I'm mostly on Twitter. Twitter's probably the best place to get in touch with me and keep track of what I'm doing. And my handle is @Manruss, MANRUSS.
Yeah, definitely. So everyone should go check you out on Twitter. I'd highly recommend you do so. And so any new comic books you'd like to promote? I know we covered Deadbox, Fantastic Four, One Star Squadron. Any other comics or any just comics in general you'd like to promote?
Yeah, I have a series coming out with, and I think it's been soft announced, but I'm doing a Batman Urban Legends series
Yes.
that sort of centers on the relationship between Batman and Ace, his dog, and also even much sooner than that, on November 3rd, issue number 1 of My Bad comes out from Ahoy, which I am co-writing with a friend of mine named Bryce Ingman, and it's actually 2 stories, one centering around a villain and one centering around a hero. Told separately. So I tell the story about the hero and he tells the story about the villain, and the comic split in half between these 2 stories and they sort of meet up in the end. So, but I'm
I'll
really
have to have
looking
you
forward
back
to that.
on sometime in November. Just
Yeah,
talk about that.
it's a crazy story. It's yeah, I'm really looking forward to that coming out. And that comes out November 3rd, issue number
Yeah,
1.
if you're writing it, it sounds fantastic. And of course, your story with Ace the Bat Hound. I never knew how bad I wanted to see you write a story about Ace the Bat Hound till now. So I'm so excited for that. Everyone, make sure to go check it out. You can go follow him. Make sure to pick up all the comics. All the comics that you should pick up are down in the description. So go check them out. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, you can follow me over on Twitter @SamboGizmo1. But please make sure to donate to the National Deaf Children's Society. You can follow them on Twitter at the NDCS at UK. They'll be linked in the description. But if you do have the means, please make sure to donate. But if not, that's completely fine. Mark, I'll touch you a little bit off air. But thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you on the next video. Check out Mark's work and long live Condiment King. Bye.